When you step into this business, you quickly learn that markets don't just test your capital, they test your nerve. Do you understand that? They don't care about your plans, your opinions, your clever theories. They only care about exposing your weaknesses. And the man who hasn't trained his mind, who hasn't steeled himself against fear and hope, he doesn't last very long. It isn't the ticker tape that beats him, it's himself. Every single time, I've said it before and I'll say it again, the market is never wrong. You may think it is, you may scream at it, curse it, call it crazy, but the only lunacy is in fighting it. And yet, that's what most traders do. They fight the tape because their emotions tell them they're smarter. Tell me, haven't you caught yourself doing the same? Sitting there with a position that's sinking, convincing yourself it will turn around simply because you want it to. That's not trading, that's gambling with a blindfold on. The difference between the fellow who makes a fortune and the fellow who loses his shirt is not some secret formula. It's not some trick or hidden signal. It's the mental edge, the edge of knowing when to sit, when to wait, when to do nothing at all. Most men can't do that. They're in too much of a hurry. They want action. But the market isn't here to give you excitement. It's here to take money from the impatient and hand it to the disciplined. Haven't you noticed how the hardest thing in this game is to sit tight when you're right and to get out when you're wrong? Now, the mind plays tricks. Hope is the trader's disease. Fear is the trader's leash. Both can ruin you. Hope makes you hang on when you should have cut loose. Fear makes you jump ship when the tide is in your favor. Think about it. How many times have you gotten out of a good trade too early because you were scared of losing the small gain you already had? And how many times have you watched a loss double because you kept hoping it would come back? That's the mental trap. That's what separates the professionals from the suckers. I learned long ago that the market doesn't pay you for being right once. It pays you for being consistently right in your behavior. Anybody can catch a lucky swing. But can you keep your head straight over months, over years? Can you resist the urge to meddle, to second guess, to chase? Most men can't. They tinker with their own positions the way a nervous hand fidgets with a matchstick. That little nervousness is what burns them down. Do you see how costly a restless mind can be? Patience is the rarest virtue in trading. Everybody talks about it, but hardly anyone practices it. They think they're patient, but the moment the ticker runs against them a little, they lose their nerve. Or the moment they've got a small profit, they rush to cash in. That's not patience. That's weakness dressed up as caution. The true test of patience is being able to sit with a position that's working and not touch it until the market itself tells you it's over. Can you do that? Most can't. Now, discipline. That's a word that sounds dull, doesn't it? Not nearly as exciting as a hot tip or a fast swing. But discipline is the backbone of this business. Without it, you're lost. Discipline means you never break your own rules, not when you're winning, not when you're losing. It means you cut your losses fast and let your winners ride. And tell me, isn't that the hardest thing to do in the world? To admit you're wrong quickly, without hesitation, without excuses. But that's the price of survival. Every great trader has scars from the times he broke discipline. I've got mine. Do you have yours? Let's talk about memory, because the market has a cruel way of teaching you lessons until you learn them. You touch the hot stove enough times and sooner or later, you'll stop touching. But in this game, some men never learn. They repeat the same blunders over and over, because their emotions run the show. The mental edge is remembering your own mistakes with such clarity that you never let them sneak up on you again. Tell me, do you carry your lessons forward, or do you let hope wipe them clean from your mind? Speculation is as old as the hills, and yet the same mistakes are made generation after generation. Why? Because human nature never changes. And that's exactly what the market trades on: human nature. The fear of losing, the greed of wanting more, the impatience to act, the refusal to wait. You're not really trading against other men, you're trading against yourself. Once you grasp that, you'll understand why the mental edge is the only edge that matters. Don't you see that no chart, no tip, no newsflash can protect you from your own impulses? I remember countless times when the tape told me plainly what to do, but my own mind wanted something else. And every time I listened to myself instead of the tape, I paid for it. The lesson was costly, but it stuck. Never argue with the market. Your opinion doesn't matter. The facts are in the price, in the movement, in the action. So why do so many traders insist on injecting their opinions? Because they lack the mental discipline to silence their own egos. Have you ever caught yourself clinging to an opinion while the market went the other way? Be honest, how much did it cost you? There's a loneliness in this game that most don't talk about. You sit there with your decisions, your fears, your hopes. No one can trade for you. No one can carry the burden of your mistakes. It's just you and your mind. That's why building the mental edge is not just about rules, it's about character. Can you trust yourself when it counts? Can you follow through when your gut screams the opposite? That's the question every trader faces sooner or later, and how you answer it decides whether you last or whether you get washed out like the rest. Many men look for shortcuts. They chase systems, signals, gurus, anything to avoid the responsibility of mastering their own minds. But the truth is, there is no shortcut. The hardest work in this business is done between your ears. The market is a mirror that reflects your own weaknesses back at you, magnified and merciless. If you're impatient, it will show. If you're greedy, it will punish you. If you're reckless, it will strip you bare. Haven't you noticed how every weakness you have as a person gets amplified once you start trading? And yet, this is also the opportunity, because if you master your own mind, the market becomes a servant instead of a master. It rewards the cool-headed, the disciplined, the patient. It doesn't do it quickly, and it doesn't do it kindly, but it does it surely. That's the edge. Not a magic formula, not a secret indicator. Just the mental toughness to do the hard thing when it's easier to do the wrong thing. And isn't it always easier to do the wrong thing? To grab a quick profit, to hope a loss will turn, to trade because you're bored. The whole business is set up to tempt you into folly. Your job is to resist. The beauty of speculation is that it never changes. The markets evolve. The instruments change, the technology speeds up, but the essence remains the same: human nature pitted against itself. And human nature, I remind you, never changes. That's why a man who learns the mental edge today will be as prepared as the man who learned it 100 years ago. The tape may look faster, the screens may glow brighter, but the game underneath is the same. Do you see how timeless these truths are? The market tests your nerve, not your knowledge. That's the truth most men refuse to swallow. They come into this game armed with figures, charts, theories, and clever talk, thinking the market is some puzzle to be solved with intelligence alone. But the market doesn't care how much you know. It doesn't care about your college degree, or how many books you've read, or what systems you've memorized. It will strip all of that away and put you face to face with your own nerves. Do you know what it feels like to watch a price tick against you, inch by inch, while your heart races faster than the tape? Do you know how hard it is to sit still when your mind screams to act? That is the true battlefield. Not the numbers on the tape, but the fight inside your chest. You see, knowledge can give you confidence, but nerve is what keeps you alive. Knowledge tells you where the odds lie, but nerve determines whether you can stay the course when the odds temporarily look against you. Tell me, haven't you ever studied a setup, convinced yourself you had it right, only to crumble the moment the market hesitated? You had the knowledge, but your nerves betrayed you. That's what happens to most traders. They're scholars when the market is calm, and cowards when the market starts to breathe heavy. The market doesn't test what you know, it tests what you can stand. The greatest moves I ever caught didn't reward me for being clever. They rewarded me for being steady. To sit in a big position as the market swings violently around you, that requires nerve, not book learning. Any schoolboy can read a chart. Any clerk can tally numbers. But when the tide turns and the room fills with panic, can you keep your head? Can you resist the urge to snatch at a small gain or to pray away a growing loss? That's where men are separated from boys. That's why I say this business is built on nerve. Most traders fool themselves into thinking they're strong until the test comes. They rehearse discipline in their minds. They preach patience with their lips. But the moment the market jolts them, all that training goes out the window. I've seen men who could recite every rule of speculation fall apart when their position dipped a few points. Their knowledge was intact, but their nerve dissolved. What good is knowledge if it collapses at the first sign of stress? Would you hire a soldier who knows every tactic in the book, but flees when the bullets fly? That's the same kind of man who trades with his brain, but not with his nerve. Now, the market knows how to toy with you. It knows your weakness better than you do. It doesn't strike all at once, it chips away. It teases you with quick profits, then threatens you with sudden losses. It lures you into acting too soon or waiting too long. And every one of these traps isn't testing your knowledge, it's testing your nerve. Knowledge might tell you that a trend is intact, but the market whispers in your ear. What if this time it fails? Do you listen to your fear or do you trust your discipline? That moment right there, that's the crucible where fortunes are made or lost. Let's not pretend it's easy. Sitting with a large commitment as the market sways can feel like torture. The human mind isn't built for it. We crave certainty, but the market offers only probability. We crave safety, but speculation is risk. So the natural instinct is to grasp for control, to take a profit too early, to avoid a loss by denying it. Nerve is unnatural. That's why so few have it. The man with nerve can do the unnatural thing, to wait when waiting feels unbearable, act when action feels terrifying, hold steady when everything screams otherwise. Do you see why this quality is rarer than knowledge? Every winning trade you've ever heard about had one thing in common. Someone had the nerve to sit through the noise. The great moves don't unfold in straight lines. They thrash, they shake, they buck like wild horses. And only the man who can keep his seat survives to the payday. How many times have you jumped off just before the real move began? How many times did you lose your nerve at the exact moment the market was testing your resolve? That's not bad luck, that's weak nerve. And the market makes no allowances for weakness. I remember times when I was dead right in my analysis but wrong in my behavior. I knew the trend. I read the tape correctly. But when the fluctuations grew sharp, I cut out too soon. I didn't fail for lack of knowledge, I failed for lack of nerve. And the market collected its toll. Other times, I knew less but sat tight with what I had, and the profits rolled in. That's when I understood it clear the test wasn't in the books I'd studied, but in the strength of my will. Knowledge pointed me to the right road, but nerve walked me down it. Do you catch the difference? Men often ask me, how do you build nerve? And I tell them through experience, through losses, through scars. No man is born with it in this business. You earn it. You get burned enough times that you learn to control the flames. You watch your own impulses betray you often enough that you begin to distrust them. Slowly, painfully, you develop the iron inside. Nerve doesn't mean recklessness. It doesn't mean ignoring danger. It means mastering yourself so that you can face danger without flinching. And isn't that the hardest mastery of all? Knowledge has its place. Don't mistake me. Without knowledge, you're a blind man wandering into traffic. But knowledge alone won't save you. It's the iron nerves behind that knowledge that keep you from bolting at the wrong moment. The market isn't a school exam where the right answer earns you a grade. It's a battlefield where the steadiness of your hand decides whether you win or lose. The cleverest analyst is worthless if he can't hold his ground. Haven't you seen bright men smarter than you or me go broke in this game because they couldn't stomach the pressure? Every tick on the tape is like a jab at your nerves. Each movement dares you to react. The weak man obeys, twitching at every feint, dancing to the market's tune. The strong man sits still, waiting for the real opportunity, the real confirmation, the real break. That strength doesn't come from knowing more, it comes from feeling less fear, less greed, less impulse. The fewer your nerves betray you, the clearer your judgment becomes. The clearer your judgment, the larger your profits. That's the chain reaction. Do you see how it all circles back to nerve? The tragedy is that most traders will never admit this. They'll keep hunting for secret methods, magical signals, some way to outsmart the game with more knowledge. But the secret isn't in the charts, it's in the chest. The question is never, do you know enough? The question is always, can you stand enough? Can you stand the noise, the doubt, the panic, the temptation? Can you stand to wait when waiting feels impossible? Can you stand to act when acting feels dangerous? The market asks these questions every day, and every day most men fail the test. Patience to sit tight is harder than courage to enter. Every beginner thinks the act of jumping into a trade is the test of bravery, but the truth is, putting your money down is the easy part. Any man can buy a stock. Any man can take a flyer when the tip is hot or when the chart looks tempting. That's not courage, that's impulse. The true measure comes afterward, when you have to sit there and hold while the market does its dance. That's when the real test begins. Haven't you noticed how quickly your hands itch to close out once you're in? How your nerves twist the moment the price jiggles against you? That's why I say sitting tight is the hardest thing in speculation. You can train yourself to pull the trigger. That's mechanical. You see your signal, you place your order, and you're in. Done. But holding that requires character. Holding means you're exposed. It means the market now controls the show, and you have to resist the urge to interfere. The ticker ticks, the price moves up a little, then back down a little, and your brain whispers all sorts of foolishness. Take it now before it slips. Or cut it before it gets worse. And if you listen to that chatter, you ruin yourself. Because the big money isn't in the entry, it's in the waiting. And how many traders have the patience for that? I've always said, there's no trick to making money when you're right. The trick is to keep it when you're right. And that's where patience comes in. The greatest profits don't come from quick flips, they come from big moves. And big moves take time. A stock doesn't go from 20 to 100 in a week. It climbs in spurts, it pulls back, it consolidates. The tape shakes out the weak hands, the ones without patience. The market feeds on their restlessness. Every time they sell too soon, they hand over their profits to the man with stronger nerves and longer vision. Haven't you ever looked back and cursed yourself for selling too early, only to watch the move unfold without you? There's a reason the phrase sitting tight sounds so dull. Because it is dull. It's not exciting. It doesn't feel like action. And most men come to this game for excitement. They want to be in the thick of it, trading every swing, feeling important, feeling alive. They think that if they're not doing something, they're missing out. But the truth is, the real money is made in boredom. The dull waiting, the endless sitting, the refusal to budge until the market itself tells you it's over, that's where fortunes are made. Do you have the stomach for boredom? Most don't. When I caught my greatest moves, it wasn't because I was smarter than the rest. It was because I was stubborn enough to sit. I'd enter a position and then do the hardest thing of all, nothing. The market would jiggle, the newspapers would scream, the brokers would chatter, and still I sat. Every instinct in me wanted to grab the quick gain, but I forced myself to hold, and eventually the trend rewarded me. That's the truth most men don't want to hear. The hardest work in speculation is done by waiting. Can you stand to do nothing while your account balance swings up and down in front of you? Now, let's be honest. Sitting tight is painful. It goes against human nature. The moment you have money on the line, you want to protect it. You want certainty. But the market gives you none. It teases you with profits, then threatens you with losses. It tests you with pullbacks, with false breaks, with rumors and noise. And every one of those moments is designed to shake you out. If you lack patience, you'll sell when you should be holding. You'll grab crumbs instead of waiting for the feast. And the man who eats crumbs never builds a fortune. Haven't you noticed how your biggest regrets in trading usually come from acting too soon? It takes more courage to do nothing than to do something. Any man can click a button. Any man can chase a stock because his neighbor whispered about it. But it takes rare courage to sit with folded hands and watch the market tempt you. to let the profits grow without touching them, to let the trend work itself out without cutting it short. That kind of courage isn't flashy, but it's the only kind that matters. The man who can sit tight when he's right will always out-earn the man who jumps in and out like a jittery rabbit. The danger is, impatience disguises itself as wisdom. The moment you take a profit, you congratulate yourself for being prudent. The moment you cut a position, you pat yourself on the back for managing risk. But often, that's just fear in disguise. It's impatience pretending to be discipline. True discipline is staying in when you're supposed to stay. It's ignoring the little wiggles and waiting for the real move to finish. And that takes a kind of mental strength that few men develop. Have you ever mistaken your own impatience for good judgment? There's another trap in sitting tight the opinions of others. You might be holding a position, steady as a rock, and then you hear a voice, a broker warning you, a friend giving his view, a newspaper headline shouting doom. And suddenly, your conviction wavers. You second-guess yourself. You think maybe you should act. But ask yourself this, did the tape tell you to act, or did a man's words unsettle your nerves? The tape is the truth. Opinions are noise. If you let them sway you, you'll never sit long enough to catch the real move. Do you see how patience requires not just ignoring the tape's wiggles, but also ignoring the world's chatter? The market punishes the restless more than any other weakness. The restless man buys too often, sells too quickly, churns his account until the broker grows rich and he grows poor. He thinks he's being active, but really he's being harvested. The patient man, by contrast, enters rarely, holds long, and reaps big. That's the paradox of trading less action, more profit. But who can resist the lure of activity? Who can resist the feeling that doing something is always better than doing nothing? That's why patience is the rarest quality in the market. It goes against every impulse you have as a human being. I've often said that the money is made by sitting, not thinking. You can think yourself into circles, analyzing every tick, every headline, every rumor. But none of that thinking matters if you don't have the patience to let the market prove you right. Too much thinking leads to meddling. Meddling leads to premature action. Premature action leads to lost profits. And so the cycle repeats, trader after trader, generation after generation. Haven't you ever caught yourself closing a trade simply because you were tired of thinking about it? The beauty of patience is that it multiplies your edge. When you sit, you let the trend compound your gain. You let time do the heavy lifting. You let the market carry you further than you imagined. The impatient man, by contrast, cuts himself off from that power. He sells too soon, misses the bulk of the move, and then chases another trade, and each chase costs him more than he knows. The patient man doesn't need 10 trades to make his fortune. He needs a few handled with iron patience. And isn't it true that most fortunes in this game came from a handful of big plays, not from constant nibbling? So when I say patience to sit tight is harder than courage to enter, I mean exactly that. Entry is nothing without endurance. The courage to act is cheap. The courage to wait is priceless. The market doesn't reward the man who acts the fastest, it rewards the man who waits the longest when he's right. And that kind of patience is not natural. It has to be forged. It has to be beaten into you by losses, by missed opportunities, by the bitter taste of selling too soon. Only then do you begin to understand that the hardest trade of all is not the entry or the exit, it's the waiting in between. Human nature never changes, and the market profits from it. That line sums up more about speculation than 1,000 books ever could. Markets rise and fall, stocks come and go, technology advances, tickers become screens and screens become algorithms, but the essence is the same as it was in my day. People don't change. Their fears don't change, their greed doesn't change, their impatience doesn't change. And because those traits remain eternal, the market always has fresh prey. Have you noticed how the same mistakes you read about in old stories are the same ones being made today? Think about it. When prices are soaring, people can't buy fast enough. They feel like they're missing out, like they'll be left behind. They rush in at the top, pushed by greed and envy, and the market punishes them with a sharp reversal. Then, when prices collapse, People can't sell fast enough. Fear grips them, they dump at the bottom, and the market punishes them again when it turns back up. This has been happening since the first trade was ever made. Why? Because human nature never changes. Haven't you felt that same pull yourself? The urge to chase at the top or run at the bottom. Every boom is built on greed, every bust on fear. You'd think men would learn. You'd think after being burned once, they'd remember. But no, they forget. Or rather, they don't forget, they just believe this time is different. That phrase is the gravestone of speculators. Each generation comes along convinced it's smarter than the last. They have new tools, new knowledge, new theories. And yet, when the tape starts to run, they get caught in the same traps. Do you see how the market feeds on that? It doesn't need to invent new tricks. It simply waits for human nature to show itself. The professional trader doesn't waste time fighting human nature in others. He accepts it. He counts on it. He knows that the crowd will always stampede when fear or greed is strong enough. He knows that tips and gossip will always lure men into foolish trades. He knows that impatience will always push them out too soon. So he positions himself not against the market, but against the weakness of men. The edge is not in being smarter, but in being steadier. And haven't you noticed how the crowd always seems to do the wrong thing at the wrong time? Human nature is predictable. When a stock has already run up 50%, that's when the majority wants in. They see the move, they get excited, they want to join the party. They don't ask themselves whether the best part of the move is already over. They only see that others are getting rich and they want their share. That envy, that greed, that impatience, it's the same in every era, and when the inevitable correction comes, they're shocked. They call it unfair, they call it manipulation. But it's not manipulation. It's simply the consequence of their own nature. Have you ever blamed the market for a mistake that was really your own impatience? When you understand that human nature never changes, you begin to see the market differently. You stop looking for secret formulas, because you realize the formula has always been the same: exploit fear and greed. You stop believing the crowd, because you realize the crowd is driven by impulse, not reason. You stop falling for new errors and paradigm shifts, because you realize those are just old delusions in new clothing. The only thing truly new in this business is the set of players. The game itself never changes. Isn't it remarkable how often history repeats itself in speculation? Look back at every great panic, every great boom. The stories are identical. In 1907, men thought they'd discovered new heights of prosperity. In 1929, they thought the good times would never end. And each time, they were blindsided by the collapse that followed. The tools were different, the industries were different, but the psychology was identical. People believed the crowd, ignored the warnings, gave in to greed, and were destroyed by fear. Fast forward to today, does it look any different? The names of the stocks change, but the behavior of men does not, and that is why the market will always have someone to feed on. Now, don't misunderstand me. Human nature doesn't change, but individuals can learn to master themselves. The masses never do, but a disciplined trader can. The mental edge comes from recognizing your own nature and refusing to be ruled by it. You know that fear will whisper in your ear, but you don't obey it. You know that greed will tempt you, but you hold back. You know that impatience will prod you, but you resist. That self-mastery is what makes the difference between the professional and the sucker. Haven't you ever caught yourself making the same mistake twice, simply because you let your impulses win? The market makes its money off the cycle of weakness. New players enter with confidence, thinking they'll be different. They make the same mistakes, lose their capital, and exit. Then a fresh crop enters, repeating the cycle. That's how the market stays alive. It chews up the impatient and feeds the disciplined. And this will never stop, because human nature never changes. The faces change, the fashions change, the tools change, but the psychology is eternal. That's why a man who understands this truth has an advantage no matter what year he trades in. Do you see how this keeps repeating generation after generation? Speculation is nothing but a mirror. It reflects human nature, magnified and exposed. When you look at the tape, You're not just seeing numbers, you're seeing fear, greed, hope, despair, all playing out in real time. Every uptick is a pulse of optimism. Every downtick is a breath of fear, and the pattern of those emotions is as old as time. The only question is whether you can read them without becoming part of them. The crowd will always be swayed. Can you stand apart? Can you recognize that what feels urgent is usually a trap? That what feels obvious is often the danger? That's the challenge every trader faces. It's a humbling truth. You want to believe that your knowledge makes you special, that your tools give you an edge. But if you don't master your own nature, you're no better than the crowd. The market doesn't punish ignorance alone, it punishes weakness. It punishes impatience, greed, arrogance. And it doesn't matter how clever you are, if you give in to those impulses, you pay the price. That's why the phrase human nature never changes isn't just an observation, it's a warning. Haven't you noticed that your biggest losses came not from lack of knowledge, but from giving in to your own impulses? So when I say the market profits from human nature, I mean it literally. Every uptick, every downtick, every dollar lost by one man and gained by another is the result of emotions driving decisions.